Welcome to part 1 of the Money Mindset series on the Unstoppable podcast. My name is Dan J. Gregory, and I am committed to hunting down the secrets of business mastery and human performance. My goal for the Unstoppable podcast is to share insights from some of the most successful entrepreneurs, inspiring thought leaders, world-class athletes, and prominent celebrities to help you to become unstoppable in business and life. Each week I'll be bringing you a new interview with an inspiring person and sharing my own results as I pursue the answers to the question, how can I create the ultimate edge in my business, make a significant impact, and live an extraordinary life? Welcome to episode 74 of the Unstoppable podcast. Today's episode marks the very beginning of a brand new mini-series on money mindset, which is inspired by the overwhelming response that I received to my episode on money shame back in episode 61, where I shared my own journey with debt and my relationship with money. Now, over the course of this mini-series, I'll be bringing you a range of top financial and money mindset experts to help you improve your financial well-being and your relationship with money. If you've been struggling to achieve the level of financial abundance that you want to experience in life, you want to eliminate debt, or you simply want to rise up the income scale, then this series is for you. Before I introduce our very first guest and tell you about the first part of this series, let's recap what's been going on over the past week on the Unstoppable podcast. Having previously shared in episode 71 how to bulletproof your habits and embed new routines that are going to support you in achieving your business and lifestyle goals, this Monday, in the solo round, I shared how to break bad habits, so now you have the full tools necessary to not only kick the habits that add no value to your life, but how to rapidly replace them with empowering habits that will help you become unstoppable in business and life. Be sure to check out both parts. Then last Thursday, I introduced you to my good friend Tim Matthews, who shared how he overcame years of struggle, stress, and sacrifice by finally eliminating the unconscious brakes that held him back. And he shares how you can do that too. It is a must-listen episode. Now, finally, before we swing it back round to today, last night I unleashed the first workshop in my Unstoppable Entrepreneur Bootcamp series here in my city of Bristol. And the first workshop was called The Way of the Unstoppable Entrepreneur, and we went deep. Shout out to my guys and girls on the course last night. You rocked it. The workshop was all about understanding and embodying the traits necessary to become an unstoppable entrepreneur and gaining real clarity on exactly who you want to be as an entrepreneur and how you want to build your business. It was extremely powerful. And I'll be launching, or relaunching, I should say, the online version soon for a very small group of unstoppable entrepreneurs. So if you want to be first in line, contact me directly either through the blog at danjgregory.com or find me on Facebook. All right, are you ready to talk money? I'm incredibly excited to kickstart the Money Mindset series and introduce you to our first very special guest, Bari Tessler. Bari Tessler is a financial therapist, mentor, coach, and mama-preneur. Bari's gentle, body-centered approach weaves together personal and creative entrepreneurial money teachings into one complete tapestry. She is the founder of The Art of Money, a global year-long money school which integrates money healing, money practices, and money maps. So you're in great hands today. Her work has been featured on the likes of Oprah.com and the Huffington Post, amongst tons of other major publications. She is the author of The Art of Money, a life-changing guide to financial happiness, and she has helped great volumes of people, both men and women, to improve their financial health. In this specific episode, Bari's going to share how to understand the mind-body connection between your money concerns and the emotional stress that you experience within the body. She's going to share how to identify the inner patterns and the money stories which are holding you back from achieving your financial freedom. We'll be talking about how to shift your perception of money in order to create the greater financial peace of mind that you desire, and how to break through financial glass ceilings by asking yourself better questions about money. And finally, the importance of having money dates to create healthy relationships with your finances. Are you ready? Let's do this. Welcome to part 1 of the Money Mindset series. Over to Bari. Bari, welcome to the Unstoppable podcast. I'm delighted to have you here. Just for context, for the listeners, we shared some information recently on money shame. I shared my own personal story, and as part of that process, in order to find answers myself, I went out looking at some of the best resources that I could find when it came to money mindset, and I came across Bari Tessler's work. So I'm delighted to have you on the show, Bari.
Thanks so much, Dan. I'm excited to be here. I really am.
So before we kick into it, would you mind just introducing yourself in your own words and sharing what your current responsibilities are right now?
Sure. I like to call myself a financial therapist. I've been using that term for 15 years, and I lead a year-long program called The Art of Money. It is online. It's with an international community. This year we have 400 students, and I also am the author of feels like a brand new book. We're just about to hit 4 months since it's been officially published, and it's
Wow.
called The Art of Money, a life-changing guide to financial happiness. So I just came back from a long book tour. So it's overseeing my year-long community. It's coming back from the book tour and sharing my book. I also take on about a handful or two handfuls of private clients, private financial therapy clients every few years. So I have a crew of those folks that I'm overseeing. I have a wonderful team that I oversee. There's so much. We're creating content every 2 weeks. We put out a new article that's really important to me. I'm a mama of a 8-year-old boy named Noah. I have a husband named Forrest who has helped run The Art of Money in the past. And everything I do is from home. I used to be live and in California. And then when I had my son 8 years ago, it became very important to me that I was home as much as I could and not traveling, even though I just went on a book tour.
Yes.
But that's another story. But so 8 years ago, I got online so that I didn't have to leave my house for work. And so I'm in my home in my 5th floor. We have a townhome, and I'm on the 5th floor, and this is where my beautiful office is with my trees. And out our window is a soccer field. Those are and the mountain is the other view.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah,
Wow.
That's a little bit of this moment.
Cool. And I saw a wonderful montage on your website in preparation for this that your husband had put together of one of your tours.
That was a road show that we did a year and a half ago. So whenever we open up the year-long program, we want to be creative. We want to do something different. And my husband is just really brilliantly creative at coming up with these kind of ideas.
Nice.
Some of them are way more ambitious than we realize. And the road show is one of them. We rented an RV for 21 days. It was me, my husband, at the time, our 6-year-old child, and my mother-in-law. And we went flew out to Seattle, and I don't know how many stops it was. It was many, many different stops. And we were interviewing our community, students and colleagues in all of those different places, and breaking bread and filming it all and publishing it all during our year-long program registration, which is usually the month of January. It was crazy.
Amazing. It sounds like a lot of fun.
That too. It certainly was. And crazy.
Great. So as I mentioned, I did a show on money shame, which was was sharing my own challenges with money. I believe in being fully authentic and vulnerable, and it's all very well me sharing, all the good stuff, but I want to share some of the challenges that I'm facing as well. And it was one of the most impactful episodes in terms of response. I had a lot of people writing in saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe you shared that journey. I'm so pleased you did, because I'm on the same path." So my real intention for this episode is to not only showcase your journey and the things that you've done, but really give people some nuggets that they can take away and make an immediate shift just by listening to our session today. So I'm really excited about what we get into. So with that in mind, would you mind sharing how your journey began, your entrepreneurial journey, and how your journey to this world of money, the art of money, where did that all begin?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be a dancer. And then as a preteen, I wanted to be a businesswoman, but that was simply because my father was a businessman. And I am a lot like him and also don't want to be anything like him. But I wanted to be a businesswoman. And then late teen, I added in psychotherapy to the mix, and I started going to therapy. I asked my parents as a teenager if I could go to therapy. So how this all comes together is in my 20s, I decided to integrate the dancer in me and the desire to be a psychotherapist and to, do really deep work with people. The entrepreneur in me did not show up until I was 32 years old, and I'll explain why. But in my 20s, I went to graduate school to study somatic psychology, which is body-centered psychotherapy. And I spent my 20s steeped in being my own case study. So I went to Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, and it's not a traditional program. We really have to be our own case studies and do our own deep work. And I worked in the mental health field. I worked in hospice and the bereavement end. and grief and doing overnight care with people that were dying. I led lots of authentic movement groups with women. I was steeped in mostly the topics of relationship and intimacy and sexuality and sensuality and body and food and grief and death. That's really what I thought my work was going to be about. I never saw myself being a traditional psychotherapist that saw 10, 12 clients a day. That was really the only vision. It was either work in the mental health field or start your own private practice. And I just felt too young when I finished graduate school at 28. But what happened was my school loan came due. And that was, it was a huge moment for me because I was terrified. I was making $11 an hour in the mental health field, doing really good work. But I got the master's degree, and I thought that was the pathway to making, a nice living and creating a livelihood based on my values and my skill set. But I was making $11 an hour, And so I didn't know how I was going to pay back that student loan. It also, it was such a huge moment for me. I started realizing, do I have a relationship to money? What is my relationship to money? And wow, they completely left this topic out of my graduate program.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? So we were studying to work with couples. How was I supposed to work with my couples if we never discussed money?
Right.
And it just went on and on and on. So it was such an obvious missing piece that either I was going to go screaming, running away and traveling the world forever. And I thought about it, because I like to present myself with options, or I was going to look at it straight on and realize, yes, this is terrifying. Yes, I've been studying all these other topics in life and developing myself. And this is way back in not even teenager phase. It's way back in like toddler phase or infancy phase, And I realized I did not receive a financial education from grade school and up in small increments on a practical, emotional, psychological, or spiritual level. And it just, I felt I was zapped with a mission to do this work because I started looking around, because at first I thought I was the only one who did not receive this education. Isn't that silly? I know that's silly. It's, we're never the only ones. We're never alone with anything. And I started looking around at my community who came from all different economic backgrounds, wealthy families, middle class, poor families. And we all were missing really significant pieces on how to have a healthy, conscious, savvy relationship to money, whether it was practical pieces or understanding all the emotions that come up around money, or, for those of us who are on a spiritual path, even adding that in. So it just became my mission to learn everything I could from the ground on up. And I fell in love with bookkeeping systems, and I surprised myself because I never thought I could do that. And I started tracking, and I started a bookkeeping business for other therapists. Wow. And coaches, and they just threw their bookkeeping at me. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. They could care less. I had a master's in psychology. They just threw it at me. I learned so much about people's patterns and beliefs. Wow. By doing bookkeeping for a few years. And then at some point I realized it was really time to integrate all the deep training that I had spent a decade in my 20s learning and studying as a therapist, and all these somatic tools and practices with the language of money and the systems of money and all these practices that I was, again, falling in love with, that really, really, really surprised me. And so I started putting it all together and didn't really know what I was doing, but just, and it felt like such an odd detour to all my friends. What are you you're doing bookkeeping? You're what? You have a master's in psychology. And I started integrating it all. And this was 15 years ago. And originally I called it conscious bookkeeping. And then I, years later, moved into the art of money. But I originally started teaching it in groups of 10 people over and over and over and over, because even though groups were kind of scary to me to teach, I always wanted to get a group together so that we could again see, no matter what economic background, no matter what family background, no matter what religion or spiritual path, or on and on and on, that this was a big missing piece in most, if not all, of our educations, and that we all had strengths around money and challenges around money. And, we all had things to overcome. And I wanted to get us all in the same room, starting to talk about an area of life that was still so taboo and so in the shadow 15 years ago. And it's been changing. I've been doing this work for 15 years now. And more people are willing to do the work, ready, know they need it, are willing to have these conversations. And for the first step for most people, the first stop is really realizing that there are layers of money shame. And that, when I first started teaching the groups, that's what I saw. It was like cloaks or layers of money shame. And everyone had stories. The contract that they didn't read years ago when they were getting into a marriage or a business partnership, and that business partnership or marriage is dissolving years later. And if they had read that contract, they would have realized they really needed to stand up for themselves and claim their value, but they didn't know how back then. So, there just has to be some acknowledgement and gentleness and unshaming for what happened at that time, and forgiveness, and realizing we're different now and we would have read that contract, or we're going to be brave enough to read it, or, we come from a very wealthy family and all of our needs and wants were given, but we'd never learned how to make our own money and create a livelihood based on, again, our skill sets, our superpowers, our unique gifts, or someone who comes from someone who, I love to interview people who come from all different backgrounds too, not just teach in groups, but I love to interview someone who says they come from a poor background and have them share their story of what was that like, and the good, the bad, the challenges, what did you have to overcome, and where are you today? And then I have a similar interview of someone who came from a very wealthy family, and what did she have to go through? So for me, I'm just always getting people together in groups, 10-person groups at the beginning, and then they just kept growing, and then we got to 20-person and 50-person, and now we have the year-long program, which is really my favorite teaching format because it's a large group, but it's also more sustainable, and it gives you more time to integrate. How are we supposed to learn this stuff in a weekend workshop or 6 weeks? I can't believe I used to teach in that way. So even in a year, this is a lifelong journey. And so I'm giving people the frameworks, the step-by-step journey that we have to learn in baby steps. So that's a teeny bit of, how I began. I really needed this work myself. It was such a missing piece for me. It was so humbling and scary. I did not know how to break through any type of money ceiling beyond $11. That was a whole journey, I've had to, how was I going to take my gifts and skills and bring them into the world and create something, a body of work that I absolutely love doing on all levels, which I've done, but it's been a long journey and, twists and turns and at my own pace. And I've had to do my own work, and then me and my husband have done our own work for 15 years, and now we're trying to bring this to our son since he was about 3 or 4, and having money conversations with him.
Wow. Impacting the next generation too. That's really, really important, especially, like you say, in terms of education. I think it's such a fundamental piece, and I think even when there is some level of education, it's rarely upon the kind of emotional connection to financial concepts. It's always the practical. At best, it's learning how to budget, but they're not showing you the emotional impact of money, which is really, in my opinion, where the biggest challenges lie.
I do study a lot of the traditional folks. I get their books. I don't read them all. I read parts and pieces, because I like storytelling, and that's why my book is filled with so much story and storytelling. So I'll read traditional books, and they're all pretty much talking about savings and investments and retirement and paying down debt and budgeting, right? And they touch on the psychology a little bit. But for me, coming from my background, and because I'm a sensitive human, money, just like many other things in life, was very emotional. And it is for so many people. And so that was one of my first things. It was my whole somatic training taught me how to listen to my body again, listen to its messages, what's the language of the body, what is intuition, what are my yeses, what are nos. And it's also the language of sensations and the language of emotions and emotional intelligence. So I first was dissecting, and I'll continue to for years. My husband's always amazed that I still have new topics related to money to interview people on, but it goes on, and the emotions, it's the whole spectrum, just like in other areas of life. It's everything from we get really angry that we have to deal with this area of life, and we're pissed, and anger comes up really strong when we, go to have a money conversation, or we go to look online to look at our numbers, or we go to pay our bills, or for others of us, we get really anxious and we get really scared. We just, our safety, security gets challenged, gets questioned. We don't know how to find it. For some people, they get really sad around money. They get really sad that they have to deal with this area of life, and they're just waiting for Prince or Princess Charming to come and take care of this for them. And, I'm generalizing, but maybe, some of their significant needs or wants weren't honored, or it wasn't okay, to have any of that as a child. And they're still looking for that to be met in some ways. And money is a metaphor. Money is a representation of that. And I can go on and on. For some of us, for me, this was part of the story. I have many money stories, but one was, this area of life is so boring and not creative, and I'm just going to fall asleep, and I don't want to have to deal with it, but underneath that, I was scared because I wasn't great at math, and so I knew I wasn't traditionally smart, but that I was smart in many other ways. So I'd somehow equated, if I'm not good with math, then I could never learn bookkeeping or a bookkeeping system or track my numbers. So I'm not good at money, and so that was something I had to realize, like, that's part of my story. Other people just check out of their bodies. And then there's the other end of this, or there's jealousy or guilt, right? I can go on and on. The other side is, what are the good feelings around money? Like, where can you get excited or feel hopeful that things could be different, or hopeful that, you can really create work and a body of work, or have a career that feels really good and satisfying for you, that's in alignment with your values, and, on and on and on. I mean, there's an entire spectrum that I like to help people understand. What's the cocktail of emotions that comes up? What's the grouping of emotions, or the 1, 2, 3 that come up in all these daily money interactions? And I'll give one tool, because you had said you hope that folks will leave with a next piece or a few
Absolutely.
next steps.
Yeah.
And, for me, one of the ways to unshame around money, and really unshame in life, but the doorway for me is money, but it's really always about life and all the other parts of life and relationships and intimacy. But for me, the main tool or practice on how to unshame around our money stories, or to help us really understand what our patterns are, what our beliefs are, what are our nuances, what's the set of emotions, the sensations, is what I call a body check-in. And, some people might call this meditation or centering, or they may do something like this in yoga, or, we're all so different. But for me, the body checking comes from my somatic, my body-centered psychotherapy training. And it's stopping and pausing. It could be 30 seconds. It could be a few minutes. And it's asking ourselves to, just check in and get curious about what's going on the inside of our body. So on a physical level, what's going on? How are you seated? Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders up? Are you breathing in your belly? Just physically noticing. On a sensation level, noticing, is there movement or stillness in your body? On an emotional level, what's present? Is it the anger? Is it the sadness? Is it the falling asleep, wanting to take a nap, and on and on? And then
So
I do
how,
always,
how do
yeah,
we
go ahead.
how do we
Go
read
ahead.
these signals? So for example, that's something I've experienced
Right.
recently, especially when I was going through the money shame.
Mm.
You could really feel it in certain parts of the body, and even when times when I'm anxious or stressed, you can feel it manifesting in different ways within the body.
Yes.
How do you learn to read those signals? Obviously, you can tell there's discomfort, and how do you identify the pattern behind it?
So for me, it's always awareness leads to understanding, which leads to changing a pattern, right? So this is not a quick fix. This is a practice. It takes time. It can take years, right? In small little bite-sized changes. So for me, it's all about giving yourself some gentle space and some compassionate space to be curious about, what are you noticing? Like, first, just let yourself notice without having to do anything about it, or make it change, or judge it, or need it to be different. we first need to just really be curious about, what are we doing here? Do I want to, go screaming, running? Do I want to punch the wall? Do I need to leave the room and go to nature now? Do I need to take a deeper breath? I think at first I invite people to do a body check-in when they're going to have a money conversation, when they're going online to look at their numbers, when they're going to the mailbox if they still get bills that way, when they're going to sit down and pay their bills, when they're in the grocery store, when they're going to tell a client their fees, right? There are so many daily money interactions that we kind of overlook or just ignore. And so this is like a first step. It's a first practice that can go on for years. And it's inviting people to start to notice what is going on in all those moments. We can make changes later. Now, some people may say, well, I know all of this, and I just need to change it already. But we don't. We're still trying to run away from it. We're still trying to change it or make it wrong, or we have a big judgment. So, how can we in the moment just let ourselves notice, catch a pattern, catch a nuance? That's where we may need to take notes and journal it a little bit. We may need to just sit and reflect on what is going on. What does this remind me of? Where does this come from? Am I having any memories from my childhood, from my parents, a lot of us have memories in pictures. I can remember my mom paying the bills, and she was, pretty tense and frustrated, but I could tell she was scared, and she was paying the bills on the dining room table. And I remember this image so well. Or I remember my parents fighting behind closed doors about money. So in these moments, I invite us to do a body check-in to notice on a physical level, sensation, emotional, and even what your breath is doing. We're always breathing, but how deep, how shallow, where is it in your throat? And I invite people to do these body check-ins before you're going to have a money interaction, maybe even during it, in the heat of the moment, when you're with your spouse or your partner, and all of a sudden you are furious, or you cannot believe they spent money differently than you, or I can give so many examples, right? Or you're just feeling so sad, you're never going to get your needs met, and on and on. Do the body check-in before, do it in the middle, and then do it after any or all of these money interactions as a debriefing. So for me, it's really just giving yourself space to have as much awareness as you possibly can to your unique patterns. Now, all of these are really universal. I've heard thousands and thousands of stories, and that's, again, why I teach in group. And we have a very private Facebook group, a secret one. I don't like the word secret, but that's the term in Facebook. It's a secret group, so no one knows it exists. But and some people just sit back and watch and witness what other people are willing to share or feel brave enough or ready to. And other people just share so much. So again, it's realizing that, we need to understand our unique money stories because of the environment we came from, because of our own nature, because of who was raising us, and on and on and on. And then, again, there's so many universal themes. So I just want people to really understand the strengths, the challenges. Usually when I meet with people, they only tell me the bad stuff, what they've done terribly, the mess they've made, the mistakes they've made. And sometimes one of the first exercises I give to people is, okay, now please go make me a list of what you've done well around money. And it really surprises them. I had someone do this a few months ago, and she came back with, well, I've been an entrepreneur since my 20s. So it's, 30 years now. She raised her son as a single mama until he's in his 20s now, and he's thriving. She's a really generous tipper. She made her list, and we keep coming back to it because she just wants to focus on the few mistakes that feel still horrible, but we're moving through that. And she's taking amazing steps to change some of those patterns, right? So for me, people say to me, I love your work, Bari, and I love this program. What was the most life-changing? Was actually practicing that body check-in. Wow. That was what was life-changing for me. So there's not really an end to it. It's bringing awareness, noticing the different feelings, physically what you're doing, journaling about it, taking yourself to nature, doing money, having money dates in bite-sized chunks. Some people can only have a money date for 5 minutes at a time at the beginning, or 15 minutes. And then they can grow from there. A money date is giving money attention. on a practical level, do you need to reach out and get a new person on your financial support team? You might need to learn a bookkeeping system, and you might need someone to hold your hand to do it. Like I needed someone to sit with me, and I jokingly say, but it was true. I needed a box of tissue because I had moments where I was crying, and I needed a lot of dark chocolate. And that's how I learned to do a bookkeeping system with breaks of chocolate and crying. And now and then I fell in love with QuickBooks, and where my husband just got on Mint or YNAB, and taught himself these programs, like in one sitting. So, what person do you need to add, to add to your financial support team? A bookkeeper, an accountant, financial planner? Do you need to learn a tracking system? Do you need to pay some bills? Do you need to move some money or close one account? And that's the practical stuff. And then there's the emotions of what is coming up for you and what are you being reminded of? And I feel it's like slowly chipping away at old stories, beliefs that were created. Are they serving you? Are they not? Where did they come from? We can always shift our financial identity, and it's something that's fluid, and we can get really stuck in old beliefs or old thoughts or old patterns. And we can, it's something that we need to update and change, and it's ever evolving. Every year I'm updating how I do things, how I relate, what needs attention, and will be forever.
Wow. Would you mind sharing a story of how you have shifted one of your own kind of money stories or money beliefs that has had a really positive impact on you?
Yeah. So, I have three. I never have one. Let me see if I could do these really briefly.
Yes.
So the first one was when I was 28, and it was right around the school loan came, but it was also when I was making that $11 an hour in the
Just for
mental health.
context, because obviously I'm from the UK, and although most of my listeners are from the US, actually 40% plus are from the US. What in terms of, so I can get an idea of the student loans, what kind of money are we talking here, so I can get a context?
60,000. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So $11 an hour.
Okay.
Which, they're trying to raise so up to 15 an hour. So that's a standard of living. Back then it was around 10. So I was making 11. And so I was saying, I thought the path to creating a nice livelihood and doing good work was getting the master's degree, but I couldn't go any further in my field at that time. And I wanted to break through a money ceiling. And this may seem silly, but at the time, being generous, we would have a lot of gatherings, and I was in a community where I was a dancer and with a lot of musicians, and we would have potluck gatherings. And so we would all bring food, and I wanted to bring like a whole basket of chocolate because that's my thing. And,
Nice.
With $11 an hour, I couldn't. And so I just started thinking generosity is with chocolate and food is really fun and social and a way that I like to give. And so anyway, I started thinking, how can I break through a money ceiling? And I just started asking it as a question, because sometimes we think we've hit a brick wall. We think that there's no possibilities, no options. But I always believe if we can ask a question in a new way or a different way, or ask it, I hike every day, and that's when I ask questions. And I try to ask new and different ones so that I can get a new and different response or new options or possibilities that I never could have imagined. And so, that was when I was 28. And all of a sudden, someone in the program asked me if I wanted to go in the back room 5 hours a week out of my 40 and learn Quicken and do the bookkeeping for the whole program. And mind you, I was throwing away my bank statements at the time. I was not looking. I did not have a relationship to money. I ignored it, I didn't think I could. And so when they asked me this, I just pretended that was a normal thing that they were asking me to do. Yeah. And I said yes, because I was asking a question like, show me something different here. Yeah. I went back and I was taught Quicken. I learned how to track the finances of this program, how to reconcile the bookkeeping. It was like heavens parted. My mind, both sides of my brain opened up. It was so empowering. And then pretty soon after that, I took a job in an accounting department and went and moved up to 13 an hour. And then they bumped me up to 15 an hour. And then someone said, I'll teach you QuickBooks. He was a contractor, and I'll pay you 20 to start, and then I'll bump you up to 25. So for me, that was a moment where it looked like a detour in my career, and yet I trusted it, and I knew it was a stepping stone, as odd as it may seem, and I knew that this was a missing skill set in my life. And so I followed, the trail, and I listened, and then suddenly I was able to break through a money ceiling that I could not see how I was ever going to do that before. And I was able to bring, lots of chocolate. So that was when I was young. And then two more were when I was 38 years old, and I was never going to have children my whole life. I didn't think it was my path. And I woke up in my 38th year, and I just woke up one day and felt different. I just changed my mind. And I know I'd been with my husband for 7 years, and we had signed that invisible line on the contract, but like no kids, not our thing. And all of a sudden, this was the only thing I saw, was to have a child, to have a son. His name was Noah. I just saw it.
Wow.
And so I had to drop seeds all year to my husband. And then we did really quick 6 weeks of therapy, and I sat there quiet. And normally when I want something, I'm not quiet with my husband. He calls me like a freight train but I only pull the freight train out or the Jaguar out in key moments, Yeah. I didn't pull it out in this moment. I just sat there knowingly, quietly, while he did his own work, that he's a different man than his father. He'd be a different parent, and it was beautiful, beautiful work. And we both came to a yes. And, in any journey, there's going to be beautiful moments and challenging moments. And we conceived our son, Noah, and, first try, very intentionally, had a great pregnancy. And then I had a huge complication in my labor. And the word lucky, the word blessed, those words aren't even the right words, I'm just very grateful we made it through. And we did. And what happened though then was I was in a huge recovery and a bit of a health crisis. And I was just about to turn 40, and at the time my business had grown. I had been 7 years into my business. I went from a one-woman show. I was doing all the bookkeeping, and then I was doing financial therapy for people because that's what they really wanted, or they wanted to be trained on a QuickBooks. And then I started leading my groups, and that started growing. And then people started coming to me and saying, I'm in the corporate accounting world, but I'm doing a yoga training on the side, and I want to work with you. I want to be in your team. Or I'm getting my master's in psychology, and I'm doing bookkeeping on the side to put me through. I want to be in your team. Nice. And I'm over here thinking, what team? Okay. Everyone, they all saw it. And one of my best things was to give this talk, of my whole methodology, the 3 phases, which I now call money healing and money practices and money maps under the Art of Money umbrella. And so I would go and give an hour and a half inspiring talk anywhere and everywhere I could. And that was free. And then I would send people to this new team that I created of bookkeeping trainers and financial coaches. And I had a business partner, and we had grown in leaps and bounds. And after I had my son, all of a sudden, I was in a health crisis and recovery, and I had to ask different questions. And my questions surprised me, but they were this. They were, what can I do in 10 hours a week? I was working 40, 50, 60 because I loved it, and I had the energy and no child. And so what can I do in 10 hours a week that I love the most and that is the most lucrative? It may seem so obvious and simple, but I had never asked that question before. And the answer was my online group program. And I could do it in a crazy bun and, sleep deprived. And I did the best I could. Yeah. And I did it for 2 years when I was recovering and I was home with my son, And so while income went way down for those 2 years, I let go of my whole team. I let go of my business partner. I let go of my whole team. Again, it seemed like this odd detour, but it was what was right at that time. Yeah. There's myths around like always increase your fees, always, you're always supposed to be growing. And I don't, that's, some years we're growing and expanding and earning more and saving more and giving more. Some years we're just living within our means. Some years we're in a huge transition, and kind of just trying to float, and this was one of those big moments that we all have in life, whether there's a death, whether we have a new baby or baby number 2, whether we get laid off or leave the corporate world to start our own business, right? Or have a health crisis, or on and on. Transitions are real. And so we did, have to really, really simplify everything. But then when my son started sleeping again, by year 3 and year 4, then this is the last story that I want to tell, is that my son was 4. We were sleeping again. He's a great sleeper now. And I was teaching my course for 3 months, and I'd created a home study, and it was really exciting, but I was still having to register every few months, for my courses. And then my husband started teaching courses, and then he had to register for he had to get people, doing it. It started feeling like launching instead of just registration, like we used to do over and over and over. And it started feeling too intense. And so all of a sudden I was like, here we go again, time to ask new questions.
Nice.
And so it was, okay, can I even change the energy? What does that mean? That's kind of ridiculous. What does that mean, change the energy? So it's not so intense. And I kept asking and asking and asking, how can I serve more people? And all of a sudden I got the vision for the year-long program. I'd had all the content already, and I had the community. They were ready. They had matured. I had matured. I was turning 44. This was almost 5 years ago. And, and lowered the price point again, against what you're supposed to do. But I went from like a mid price point, to a little higher, to a lower price point. I know that's all relative, right? Yeah. And we went from 50 students to 320 students in the first year.
Wow,
and shift. And it became my favorite, as I've said, my favorite teaching model, because it's the most sustainable for my life and my family. And I get to be the most generous with my content and all the interviews I've ever done. And they get everything in this year-long format. So that's kind of how I roll, and how I'm continually asking myself, where am I at in my life? What phase? What are my values and priorities right now? How can I honor my family and serve and give my work in the most generous way? But also, being as mindful around time and resources and health. And so for me, I've been on a journey on how to create a business model that would honor that. And, over 15 years, I've had a few business models that were really sustainable, and then would hit a transition and then go back to figuring all out again, and up and down income, and then trying to get to a more sustainable business model again. So that's, underneath all that, I think you can hear it's been, or maybe not, but it's been years of what is my value.
Absolutely.
And, having to learn about boundaries and elegant no's, and doing my own money work at all levels, and on and on.
Wow. So there's lots of things coming up for me right now that I could dive right into. So one, you were talking about growth, and that we're always supposed to be growing. I think the problem with that is that a lot of people associate growth with financial growth, whereas it sounds like during that period, there was a whole different type of growth that you were going through with, getting well, and, bringing up your son and all that kind of growth, which is probably hugely expanding in terms of the challenges you have to go through, and the lessons you learn through that process. I was just listening to a talk with Tim Ferriss and Derek Sivers, I think he's called, Derek Sivers. Apologies to him if I say his name wrong, but he was talking about how the culture teaches us that every success has to be associated with money, and it's a dangerous thing to do that, because it eliminates all the other things that make up. You take away someone's money, and if they're left as a unhappy, stressed individual, then are they successful? So that's an interesting thing in itself.
Yes.
One thing I'm keen to explore, a lot of the listeners to this show in particular are entrepreneurs or business leaders, and you've got people right from the startup stage, or even corporate escapee type people, right up to some seriously successful people. What I'm keen to understand is your view on money mindset when it comes to entrepreneurship, because I've been through the transition from the corporate world where you have the security of the cash coming in every single month, right through to the complete insecurity of going out on your own and having to build everything yourself, and everything from, asking people for money. And in fact, I'll share this with you right now. The previous interview I just had was with a gentleman called Jeff Woods, just before we got on the line. He had a podcast called The Mentee, where he documented his journey from employee to self-employment. And he's now the CEO of The One Thing, which is, I don't know if you've seen the book, The One Thing by Jay Papasan. He's now the CEO of their company. And one thing that we discovered, his whole business has been built around building really solid connections with people, building new relationships. And, we were talking about his podcast and how he got guests on the show and how he built relationships. And he uncovered within me, this came up live during the episode. This is, these episodes are designed to be raw and authentic, that even though my intention whenever I bring a guest to the show is to showcase their work, to share their value and really help my community, part of the piece for me is also learning for myself, and the desire to build a relationship with the individuals that I'm speaking with on the podcast. For me, it's all about building that high quality network of people who are on a similar path. And I had this guilt about that underlying desire. So he said what he picked up from that was that it's an ability to receive. There's a receiving issue. And when he said that, it suddenly struck me, actually, in terms of my money patterns as well. I've had challenges with receiving. So what advice or tips or strategies would you offer to someone like myself who's struggled and perhaps still struggling with the ability to receive?
So for me, that's just one of many, many, many issues that can come up, right? Because I've never been in the corporate world. I haven't had a steady paycheck since I was really 28 years old, and I'm going to be 48. Nice. So I'm coming up on 20 years of being an entrepreneur.
Hooray. Good on you.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was more, I can't work for someone else.
That's exactly how I feel now.
Okay, we're unemployable, proudly unemployable. I've been this way, probably my whole life, but I tried in my 20s a little bit. So it's different. There are pros and cons to, from what I see, working for a company, getting a steady paycheck. There's no guarantees with that. I know so many people that are laid off, so many ways. But what they get is they get to plan and budget, and in such an easier way that we can, because it's a set amount of money that's coming in every 2 weeks or every month. It doesn't mean they won't play with, meaning like fight with themselves or spend more or have issues in that way, right? But as entrepreneurs, this is a serious journey. I mean, I would call it, my word is more of a psycho-spiritual journey, meaning that you need to dig deep, you need to dig deep to fall and fail and trip and get up again and do it all over and over, and keep persevering. And some businesses grow really fast, some slow. I think for me, entrepreneurship has been really getting in touch with what's my own rhythm, and can I be okay with that too? Because, we all grow at different rates. Yeah. And I think we can control that to some degree. I mean, we can't control all of it, right? We can plan and we can craft. The money piece, though, there's so many parts of it. There's how do you come up with your fees? This is a huge thing for us as entrepreneurs,
Absolutely.
And, I just put out another article on this about a month ago, and it probably has 10 different questions, not one, 10 different questions to ask when coming up with your answer. And it has everything to do with what phase of life are you in, and what lifestyle do you want to be living. I do a budget, which I call a money map in 3 tiers. So what do you consider bottom line basic needs? What do you consider comfortable? And what do you consider ultimate? And, we're at different phases, and also when I do that with my community, the numbers are so vastly different. Your ultimate may be my comfortable may be your ultimate. or vice versa, right? Or so it's so fascinating to me how people define what each of those tiers are, what the numbers are that go with that. So for me, entrepreneurship is also knowing that your business and personal are separate, even though sometimes it feels we're fully one and connected for some of us. At some point, we do need to separate them out. Your personal life and financial house needs its own bookkeeping system, needs its own goals. Your business needs its own bookkeeping system. They're a separate entity, its own set of goals. They do influence each other. Again, some people want to create big businesses or businesses with a huge social mission that give or donate in a certain way. Others of us want more lifestyle businesses. So I think it's going, to the drawing board and giving yourself once a year or twice a year and then checking in every month on money dates. Again, what's your vision? And is it $1 million business, or would a $200,000 business be wonderful for you with this phase? Would 60,000 be? Would 500? I love to map this all out with the numbers. The numbers aren't the end all, but they're part of the story and they tell a story. So I'm really about having entrepreneurs get a bookkeeping system. So many don't. I'm really about entrepreneurs learning how to use the system and doing it for a while and then handing it over to a bookkeeper. They don't have to do it forever. Yeah. I wound up doing my bookkeeping for 12 years, because I just loved it. And every few days I could check in and see the inflow and the outflow and track it. And then, for some people, they have trouble invoicing. So this is a receiving issue too. They have trouble invoicing people and sending out those invoices or asking to be paid. Right? So that's a whole moment. Or we don't even know, to come back to the article on charging. So for me, it's about what phase of life are you in? Who do you want to serve? Do you want to serve lower income folks? Do you want to serve, more of a small elite group? For me, I don't make these calls, right? And I don't have judgment. It's what is right for you and what lifestyle and what are your numbers and your 3 tiers and on and on and on. And I ask people to do a body check-in. What's the number that feels right? But it's not just what feels right. It needs to also, I want you to answer and contemplate all those other questions as well. And then come up with a set of fees that works for right now, that leads into, again, a business model that really serves you. So even to come back to the receiving piece, I would need to know more of what that means to you and where that comes from. And do you want to just do your good work? And do you feel like it's all going to work out? Do you, what happens when you go to ask for money? Will you tell me just a little bit about that so I can understand that more?
Yeah. So in my case, I think asking for money, I've never had really a big problem with that, but there was a struggle when I first started my business in terms of sitting in front of that. That's when I had the challenge when I first started. I think it was going from the transition from, when I sat in a corporate position and there was all set for me, but when I came out for myself, I had to decide on my pricing structure, and I had to decide. It really came down. A lot of the challenges I had was around my own self-worth, and I was able to go into that and explore why I was experiencing that sensation. And I realized that I was not placing the value on myself. And there's all these stories that came up that told me that, how can you charge for this if this person is charging that, if you haven't been in business for this many years? The reality was I had been in business for years. It was just in a different format.
Yes.
So I had all these kind of limiting beliefs, all these kind of stories. And I'm just curious, when Jeff brought that up on the podcast, I thought that's interesting. If I'm deliberately not forming relationships with people who I'm capable of forming relationships with because I don't feel worthy, it's that worthiness still coming up. It was a little seed that came up again as a repeating pattern.
Yes. So for me, entrepreneurship is all about knowing our worth and claiming it and cultivating it more and more. I don't think it's like one day we wake up and we're like, I'm worthy, and we're done. I feel like this is a lifelong journey.
Yes.
And I think as humans, we get to a point where we forget. I remember my 20s so clearly in graduate school, lying on the floor crying in the middle of a group because I had forgotten who I was or what I came here to share. It felt awful. And it really was, I don't know my value. I don't know my worth. And I had to remember that again and claim it. And it's so different when you're working for yourself, and I just feel, I don't think we can bypass it. I think this is just part of the inner work that needs to happen. We will be called to work on our value and our worth. And I always say this, that we're born, the moment we're born, we are a unique human with our unique gifts. Therefore, we're worthy. Like day one, our worth, our true worth is right there, and our value is there. And our value and worth has nothing to do with how much or how little money we have, or we can never put a numerical value on our value and our worth. And yet in the physical world, like this is how we exchange.
Yes, of course.
Through money, right?
Yep.
And so that's why I don't know any entrepreneur who hasn't had to work through how do they know their value? How do they claim it? How do they include all the experience they had as a mom in the corporate world as they're aging? All these things, we need to include all of them.
Absolutely.
When we're also our lifestyle and how much energy we have and how our health is. And it's evaluating it from a fuller picture so that we can come up with a fee and business model that we can stand in, that feels really good for now, and looking at the whole field, like people charge more, people charge less, but I don't think we can really stand fully in our value until we answer some of these deeper questions. So I love that you've been doing that, and I think you'll just continue. You're also reminding me of the concept of visibility. As we're an entrepreneur, we have to be visible. We have to be get more and more okay with I'm here, I'm over here, this is what I do, and making friendships and connecting. But it's also about intimacy. I mean, I'm a therapist. I can go on and on. What you're naming is a little bit about intimacy and connection. It's a little bit about visibility. It's a little bit about value and worth. For me, all of that comes up when we are growing a business. I don't know any in my world. I don't know anyone who can get around any of that. And it's scary to form friendships. It's, for some people it's easier, for most of us.
Yeah.
It's scary. So we need to find ways that, some people hate networking events, but I don't know, they'll, I back in the day used to go to my health food store and I met tons of people that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a confident person, and I've always managed to build great relationships with people. I think the challenge for me, especially with the podcast, when I first started out, the first guest I had on had, made his first $2 million by the time he was 24 years old, and there I was at 32, kind of starting all over again. And it was just kind of, I put this guy on a pedestal. I think the problem when you do that is you put yourself in a pit, and that's how that you get that kind of complex around value. And that was an interesting, it was a blessing to have that, because I was able to work through. I was asking myself, well, we're all human beings. We all sleep on our backs, and we all go to the toilet first thing in the morning. It's we're all made of the same stuff. And it was a good process to go through early on, because it's helped me, have deep conversations with some really, really fascinating people that have done some incredible things that I aspire to replicating. So it's just the piece that I was talking about with Jeff was about how do we build that long-term relationship, and he, there was some interesting points that he raised during that, as you've reiterated. So that's really, really powerful. So I appreciate we're coming up to the final round. Just before we go into the quick fire final round, I'm just really curious to learn a little bit more about the course, The Art of the Money. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. So it's a year-long program that takes you through my methodology that I've been teaching for 15 years in every format imaginable, over and over and over and over, and have matured and fine-tuned. And it's 4 months of money healing, 4 months of money practices, 4 months of money maps. How it's formatted is that every month there's a monthly mission filled with exercises and interviews with guest teachers from all the different money backgrounds and therapy backgrounds and Enneagram backgrounds and that you can imagine. So there's a lot of guest teacher interviews. There's exercises for each monthly theme and mission. There are weekly love notes every Friday. They get a love note saying, hey, here's something to think about in a different way.
Cool.
Go listen to this interview and on and on. And then there's a monthly 2-hour call where they get little mini coaching sessions with me. And then there's a private community. So that's a little, it is. And what's wonderful is that a lot of the community, I don't know what the number, if we're at 50%, but at least 50% come back every year because they know it's a lifelong journey and they keep coming back to be a part of the community and to do this work. And I also have I had 5 TAs. I have 5 TAs this year, 5 teaching assistants, 2 money financial coaches. 2 financial planners and 1 somatic therapist and 1 bookkeeper and on and on.
Wow,
So
wow.
that's a little bit about how that works. And we open it up every year in the early bird in a week from today.
Oh, wow. Timing. Like nice.
Yeah. We're trying to do it before the elections because we're usually on top of it. And we don't want to be for obvious reasons. And so we'll do an early bird in October and then open up for the year in January.
Amazing. So where should people go to find out more about your work? What's the best place for people to go?
The best place is my website, baritessler.com, and that's where tons of blog articles and great content. And then I'm all over social media as well. And then my book, The Art of Money, A Life-Changing Guide to Financial Happiness, is available everywhere online.
Amazing. So my 2 final questions for you that I ask every single guest. What piece of advice would you give your younger self if you were able to go back and start all over again?
I would just say to her, just hang in there, and all your sensitivity is going to really serve you when you get older. So don't be so freaked out about it. Just relax into it, and your sensitivity is going to really serve you in life and business and everything, and parenting.
Awesome. And then the final question, the most important one of this show: what does it mean to be unstoppable to you?
What it means to be unstoppable to me is that I'm defining what a good life is. I'm defining what being successful is. I'm defining what a good life and family life is over and over and over for myself. So, I'm asking it and I'm defining it. It's not based on anyone else. Sure, I compare in moments, but I'm always coming back to what's my rhythm? Who am I truly? What am I really here to serve in this lifetime? And just to make sure I rest after a book tour, and then, knowing that I'm going to come back in again because I'm always coming back in, but I need that rest time. And so unstoppable to me is just really knowing that I'm going to deeply listen to rest and go and rest and go. And, just to keep coming back in with new ideas and new excitement and finding that, which I find whenever, when I'm in a deep kind of rest place right now, but I know whenever I go hiking or I do that often, I'm going to find the next way to serve and give, and the next piece of my life.
Amazing. Well, Bari, I believe that you are unstoppable, and thank you for unleashing your greatness today on the Unstoppable podcast. It's been a phenomenal interview. I've really enjoyed the process. I've gained a lot myself, and I can't wait to share the art of money with the listeners. You're going to do some great things for the people that you impact. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Bari, for elegantly kickstarting this very special mini-series on money mindset. I've put a link to Bari's body check-in, to her Art of Money book, and her Art of Money program, which is currently officially in pre-enrollment phase for the 2017 kickoff. So do go and check that out in the show notes at danjgregory.com/74. And on Monday's Solo Round coming up, I'll be bringing you an episode entitled System Reset, where I'll be discussing how I am drawing a line under my own debt and sharing my exact plan for eliminating my debt and achieving my financial goals before the end of 2016. If you want to free yourself from your own debt, or you want to double down and smash your financial targets out of the park in the remainder of 2016, then be sure to tune in this Monday. I'm going to be kickstarting the countdown to the end of the year, and I invite you to join me in committing to achieving your financial goals, starting with a 30-day sprint in November. Are you game? Tune in on Monday to get the lowdown, and please, please, please do share this episode if you know someone who has their own money challenges and they need to get it handled. Between this mini-series and the 30-day sprint that I'll be kicking off in my private Facebook group shortly, you will find everything you need to create real financial abundance and prosperity in the remainder of this year. You're going to have a stack of resources and support to help you along the way. So join the Facebook group right now at unstoppablepodcast.com/tribe. You'll find the joining instructions there, or just go straight to Facebook and type in Unstoppable Mastermind. Now, please remember to subscribe to the Unstoppable Podcast to make sure that you never miss a beat. Part 2 of the Money Mindset series will be released next Thursday with our next very special guest. And that is it. That's all we have time for today. We've been rocking for over an hour. Well done if you've made it to the end of the episode. Group high fives. Until next time, go out there, unleash your greatness, build your empire, make your impact, and live your ultimate life. You are unstoppable.